Hello and welcome back to the podcast, We Are Selling. My name's Lee Woodward, the author of the Complete Salesperson course. Today, we are going to be discussing performance under pressure. And there's not a person listening to this audio that hasn't felt that weight of, I haven't done the sales I thought I would do. We haven't broke even as a team. I'm a business owner. I'm in an effective business unit. How do we pull this back together? Why has this even happened? And when we look at performance under pressure, probably one of the most amazing examples we see is in the sporting industry. In previous episodes, I've spoken about our work with the Australian swim team coach, Bill Sweetenham, and he talks about that preparation and performance. But at this time of recording, the AFL Grand Final has just been all over our TV screens and our press. Someone involved in that is going to be chatting with us today, and that is Dr. Nick Poulos. Nick, welcome aboard.
Thanks for having me, Lee.
Nick, at time of recording, I'm actually right on the Gold Coast right now at your home, and you and I watched the grand final together, which is really exciting. And I'm going to take our listener back through your background in a moment. But just before the grand final, what happened weeks before that? Who are you and where are you from?
I'm the head of high performance for the GWS Giants Football Club, and I've been doing this role for 6 seasons. The few weeks prior to the grand final, we made the final series. Unfortunately, we were dismissed after two rounds. They call it being dismissed in straight sets. We actually finished in the top 4, which meant we get a second chance if we lost our first final. Unfortunately, we lost both. So it was disappointing to watch the grand final on the weekend with mixed emotions. But we also know that we feel very, very honoured and privileged that we've had the opportunity to actually participate in it. So that's a really good thing for us. But it's still burning inside.
Yeah, you know, they say when you're speaking to sporting legends, never just say it's just a game. And we might talk about that. For those players that went through that final process and the preparation and you think you're going to be there, it was only a couple of years ago. Tell us what happened there.
Well, last year, we also made the finals. We had to do it a little bit tougher. And by that, I mean we finished outside the top 4, like the Brisbane Lions did on the weekend, and had to win every week through the final series. So we lost to Collingwood by 1 point in the last minute of the game to miss out on a spot in the grand final. That was disheartening as well. So we've had 2 years in a row of missing opportunities. On both occasions, we knew we were good enough to beat any team on our day, but at the final hurdle, we couldn't get the job done for numerous reasons. So that's the ultimate prize. We want to get there. That's what you spend weeks and weeks and weeks and hours and hours and hours preparing for. Unfortunately, it doesn't always happen. There's only one winner and one winner on the day.
Now, Nick, thanks for sharing that with us. And I thought it was important to do that at the beginning of the interview due to time of recording. This has all just happened. But let's just step back a moment now. Being a high performance manager and then still coaching on these teams, you've had an incredible career. And I want to just step into some of those highlights. Separate to the Giants, what's some of the career highlights you've had in doing this role?
Well, prior to the Giants, I was fortunate enough to work with the Australian Rugby Sevens team for 3 years, travelling the world, participating on the World Series circuit, attending Olympic Games, Commonwealth Games, World Cups. That was an unbelievable experience, a lot of travel, a lot of pressure involved with it. Winning our home World Series final in Sydney was a highlight for that.
That's the first time that's been done.
First time it's been done in Australia. And we were very, very proud about that. Had a wonderful team, playing group and coaching group. To celebrate that with friends and family was just unbelievable. For those who are aware of the Sevens series and Seventh Circuit, it's a brutal series. You're travelling 2 or 3 weeks away overseas, then you're back home for a few weeks, then you're away again overseas for a few weeks. My final year in the Sevens, I added up the cumulative amount of time I was overseas, and we spent 6 months of the year overseas, off and on, off and off and on. So it's a fair bit of time away from friends and family. But to demonstrate on home soil in Sydney that we won that was a highlight of my career in the Sevens world.
Absolutely amazing. And just for our listeners, especially in the UK who follow, the AFL's become interesting all over the world as it becomes one of the biggest entertainment sports next to soccer and the NRL. Let's discuss our topic today, performance under pressure. Nick, you've got a master's and a PhD master level strength and conditioning coach. You've done all this study to be there for the players. But for you, what is performance under pressure?
It's a really good question, Lee. Ultimately, performing under pressure has many, in my mind, has many aspects. So first and foremost, it's my ability to be able to perform under duress, how I portray myself and lead myself in front of other staff members, other team members, other stakeholders, whether it's board members, senior coaches, coaching staff, the players. And ultimately, I've got to put my game face on every time I walk into the club or on the playing pitch. And that in itself has its own pressures. So you feel that, you live it, you breathe it. And it's how I have to handle that personally as well as professionally, let alone, we spoke about this before, the ability to be able to handle that pressure when you come home, when you walk in the front door at home in front of your wife, your kids. So that's one element. The second one is, understanding that you may have a really good day, an unbelievable day, a wonderful win, but for example, something might have gone wrong on the day. You've lost a key defender or someone to injury and they're going to be out for the next 6 weeks. Everyone's celebrating about that, but inside you're feeling the pressure internally, but also other staff members, team members will know that you have to explain to the coach that, yep, we had a great win, but you've lost your All-Australian defender for the next 6 weeks, and how I'm going to handle that, how we're going to handle that as a group, as a team, and try and stay positive about it. Because the ultimate prize is actually we want to try and get to the end of the year. My current senior coach always talks about we want to be playing our best football at the right time of year, because you're not going to have peak every week. We try and peak and win every week, but the ability to be able to perform our best football at the right time of year, under pressure when it matters, and making sure that our best players, our most highest paid players, have their best final series, because when it matters, they need to be able to stand up under pressure. So performance under pressure in that element is that we need experienced players be able to perform at their best under the highest pressures of game in front of 100,000 people at the MCG. They could be down by 20, 30 points or up by 20, 30 points, and they still need to win the game. And things are not going to go well in a 2-hour game of football. There's going to be ebbs and flows, momentum swings, and it's how those players and the staff, myself on the bench or the coaches in the coaching box, handle that pressure. It's not like you can go home, you finish the game, you win or lose, and you go home and it's all done. It carries on. So the next day, the recovery processes, the review of the game, the performance under pressure happens cyclically each week, daily, and each week through the momentum of the season. And that in itself, the cumulative effect of that adds pressure. So in terms of answering a question about performance under pressure, there's so many elements to it. And I hope that resonates with your listeners.
Yeah, how interesting. We can be in the quiet of this room today talking about this topic, but then suddenly you're on the bench, 80 to 100,000 people. That just brings a whole different concept to this whole thing of performance under pressure. And as we saw in the grand final on the weekend, you've got 20-year-olds, you've got 35-year-olds, which is quite a big gap in the sporting world. It's not in life. But you've got a young 20-year-old player who's first time in a grand final. And then you've got someone who's, this is my last chance at a premiership. How do you manage the mental side of that?
It's a really, really good question. And handling each individual player as a human being on their merits is fascinating in my role in particular, and especially the staff that support them. So, it's very raw for us right now, as you mentioned, coming off the back of these 2 losses. But we've got some 300 game players and very experienced players who may only have a year to go in their career, and time's running out and they haven't won a premiership and they haven't finished on top. The way they're feeling and reacting to the situation is very different to a 20-year-old, 21-year-old. We've got a 19-year-old who played his first final series a few weeks ago, and he's got a 10 or 15-year career ahead of him. Obviously, that's going to be an amazing experience for him, but he won't be hurting as much as the 35-year-old player that we've got has literally one more year of his career left, albeit it's still hurt, and he went through the emotions and gained some experience from it. So he's seeing it through a completely different lens. In my role in particular, how we manage that player psychologically, the young player through those losses after having a wonderful year, and how they approach their next pre-season and their training in terms of their training ethic, their training attitude, what they learns from the season will be vastly different to the 35-year-old who's a seasoned campaigner, has been there and done that, played multiple final series, made a grand final previously and lost, knows how to train, knows how to prepare to the level. I'm not going to teach that player any more about preparing their bodies for the rigours of an AFL football game, but how I can manage them psychologically and work with them, empathise, put my arm around them. We're in this together. How can we get the best out of you next year? So we finish the year off next year as a group, as a team, to ultimately give them the final success that they aspired for their whole life, their whole career, since they were a little 4-year-old, 5-year-old wanting to play on the big stage. So it's vastly different.
Take me into, there's mind and body, and obviously in your role, there is so many systems and procedures and processes that you have to get the team ready. And be it you're traveling overseas to land in San Francisco for the Olympics and you're doing the sevens, they get there, they've got to recover, and then suddenly you've got this whole week planned. So in that first week, they don't overcook and burn themselves out. There's so much goes on in the fitness side, but what about in the mental side, the breathing? There's people listening to this right now thinking, I'm going really bad. I'm not thinking well. Got to get out of this rut. I don't know what to do. But what is it you teach and coach those people on a mental level to say, you can pull this back?
Well, it's interesting you say that. We've actually brought this year in particular, we brought a breathing consultant in to help us with some breath work to really for the psychological, as much as there's some physical benefits of undertaking some breathing exercises. There's some more evidence and research around that at the moment. I think the most important thing is that if the athletes and the players know that your systems and structures around their preparation are well taken care of, and on an individual basis as well as a team basis, they're fully aware that they don't need to worry about that. It's excess mental space that you don't need to consume yourself with, as long as you've done the preparation, as long as your staff members have done the preparation. So then it comes down to how the player individually prepares, and coaches, even myself, how you individually prepare yourself for the big game day. And that will happen individually. My role, I'll have to respect each individual player's needs. We have some unique players. So in the week before the game, it starts with a process. So there'll be a recovery process on day one, game day +1. We'll do our reviews. We'll do our first training session of the week, which will look very, very different on an individual basis. We'll have a team focus, but it will be very individually designed based on individual needs, how they've recovered from the game, whether they've had an injury, whether they've had a concussion, which means they're out for 12 days minimum. Then we prepare ourselves for the main training session of the week. The main training session of the week is you have to be ready to go to work. That's where it counts. That's the final preparation before you go into a game. What they do in between that, we have no control over on a player's day off, other than they know how to prepare themselves. We'll educate them. They'll do their own recovery processes. They'll undertake their own mental relaxation, if you want to call it that, and that will look different for every player on their day off. It could be some guys might go surfing, some might go to the beach, some might go and play golf, which we sometimes don't like because we don't want them walking around a golf course, but if that's their way of switching off. For me personally, on my day off during the week, while I'm consumed by work, me going to the gym is my mental switch off, mental as much as physical. Following the main training session of the week, which we have to get through, it's really then, okay, we are in our final preparation period for match day or for our game day. It's all about recovery. We'll do a version of it. We call it a captain's run, or you could call it game day -1 preparation, where it's really just getting out there, getting moving. And we'll have a final team meeting, call it a game plan meeting, ready for our game day. And then it's really on the game day, you go to work and let it unfold. It's certainly not, it's the pinnacle of the week and the highlight of the week. But if you've done the work and you've prepared well, your systems and structures have been robust, sound, you don't have to worry about that. You just got to go out and perform. Now, within the game, things change. There's momentum swings, et cetera. But you know, if you walk on the battlefield and you've done the work, everything else will just unfold the way it should unfold. You should not go into that game knowing that you have not prepared well. And that's how we focus on it. So mentally and physically. Some players may turn up on game day and they haven't done the work. It doesn't always happen. They haven't done the work, and more often than not, they'll get found out very, very quickly.
That's a thing of life though, isn't it? Like, I'll have all these people say to me, oh, it's tough at the moment. We're just short of listings, and if we had listings, we'd be fine. Well, separate to that point, let's go back a moment. Do you have an established client program? Well, no. And have you been running listing streams to make sure you don't get into these snookered spots? No, I haven't. Well, that's really what's wrong. It's not where we are. And that beautiful saying, the future belongs to the prepared, just becomes such a clarity moment that I know myself, Nick, I'm very structured and I'm disciplined, but I can't get away with not doing that. I'll get found out. I'll get caught up. I'll be out of step. So it doesn't matter who you are in life. And then, 2003 Tonga, you're at the Rugby World Cup. Take us into that, because this is just, we speak about our real estate business lives and, listings are up, listings are down. You're going to the World Cup. How's that experience for performance under pressure?
Unfortunately, I worked with a minnow team at the time, and I was brought in as a consultant initially, and then we had a short-term contract with Tonga because they can't afford to pay a full-time high-performance manager or best strength and conditioning coach. But the highlight was that, okay, we're attending a World Cup on our home soil in Australia. So it was an amazing experience in that I had some peers that worked with the Australian rugby team. Another colleague of mine who I worked with was working with the Japan national team. And during the World Cup league, like, we're bringing each other, what are you doing for this? What are you doing for this? When are you doing your recovery session? And it's quite amazing just to have that dialogue within the World Cup. But to work with a national team, which will not likely make the finals, if at all, was an interesting concept. But a lot of the players, and the way we approach it, if they performed well during the World Cup, you're setting their futures up. So I would have suggested, off the top of my head now, at least 6 players would have got international contracts over in clubs overseas, or UK, France, off the back of that World Cup. So it was a different focus for the group. Yes, we wanted to succeed. And I had a wonderful coach, Jim Love, who was a former New Zealand Maori coach, who brought me into the fold. And the way he led the team and coached the team was unbelievable. I learned so much from him, knowing full well that if we can make a quarterfinal, fantastic. But again, the focus being, well, we wanted these players to perform at their best for their own futures, because some of them were already playing with clubs. They might have got bigger contracts and overseas, and some of them were playing in Tonga for no money, just for the national team, and to provide them the opportunity to prepare well, train at elite level, prepare for a World Cup, to then give them the opportunity to earn great money overseas with a club, will set themselves up and their families up back home for the future. So it was a different focus. And we're not preparing for winning the World Cup or winning a grand final. It's a completely different mindset of how we approached it. At the same time, respecting their culture. Very different culture to Australians or South Africans or English. You have to respect how they eat, their diet, how they sing when they get together as a group, how they discipline each other, and the hierarchy within the group. So if you're an elder player, then the younger players have to have to abide by any rules and regulations there. And I remember one day, Lee, even some of the older guys, we had one senior leader within the group who fell out of line with the culture, and he's probably the most experienced player within the team. And I was sitting there with the coaching staff, and they were disciplining each other, shall we say that. And one of my assistant coaches during our World Cup preparation just said, "Nick, just keep your mouth shut, have a look at this." And they started talking in Tongan. At the time, I didn't know much about Tongan culture, but they went up the front. The captain of the team disciplined this elder statesman. And this day and age, you would just shirt off, big slap, like slap on the back, like you've been whacked, you've been smacked. And I remember putting my head down, just looking just down on the floor when I was sitting down, thinking, don't even look at anyone, don't say anything. Like, you could have heard a pin drop in the room. And these are big Tongan players who are, unbelievable human beings, but disciplining this elder statesman. I'm like, my gosh, just have to respect that. Did the discipline thing and finished, and then went on with the team meeting. After that, coach did the game plan. It's unbelievable. Wow. So different learnings, different environment, but just respecting that team culture, their national culture, how they operate, falling into those systems. And it was very similar when I was in Japan, different cultures, but just respecting how they do it, what they do, their systems and processes, how they operate, and falling into line with that.
How amazing. And Nick, I noticed you've worked across different codes. You've done soccer internationally. AFL's obviously been a massive one for you. The rugby sevens, these are big gigs. One that was of real interest to me was AFL in Adelaide. You were down there for the Crows High Performance Manager. We have a lot of Adelaide listeners to this program, by the way. A very famous show for Adelaide. But in Adelaide, you've got, a two-team town, and even that's a pressure in itself. But during your time there, 2 final series, but a series of things happened that no one expected in time. Take us into what happened there.
Again, very, very unusual circumstances and unique circumstances.
And this is performance under pressure in a different way now.
Yes, absolutely. So a year after I'd started at the Crows, we had a senior, for the Adelaide listeners, you may or anyone who knows AFL will know who I'm talking about here. We had Dean Bailey, who was former Melbourne head senior coach. He was essentially an advisor, senior assistant to a younger head coach that we had, senior coach Brenton Sanderson. Had a really good relationship with him. He mentored the players, especially the older players, as much as younger players, in a massive way. Highly respected. He ended up falling ill to cancer. I remember at the time sharing my own personal journey because I, as you would well know, I had my own journey with cancer. So we formed a relationship during that time where he had to undergo a whole lot of chemotherapy, etc. Unfortunately, his life was taken away from him within a few months. It was a very, very aggressive form of cancer. At the time, because he'd worked with me and he previously worked with the Adelaide listeners, worked with Darren Burgess, who was now at Adelaide, but he was previously at Port Adelaide. We were both in the same town, 2-team town in Adelaide and Port Adelaide. So we both were passing each other, visiting each other in hospital with Darren, myself and Dean to help him navigate his way through that journey. Unfortunately, he lost his life. So the club was very affected. Players were affected, staff were affected. And that was quite an emotional time. But during that time as well, once Dean had passed away, Brenton Sanderson ended up being moved on in a couple of years later. So we lost coach, and we had a new coach come in, Phil Walsh. And Phil built a very, very good relationship with staff and players, but very, very strong in his philosophies. Everyone bought in very, very quickly. It was a quick turnaround in terms of how we performed and played the game under pressure. We got back on track and with a winning culture. And unfortunately, in that year, 2015, his life was sadly taken away from him as well at the hands of his own son. And that just rocked the club. So within 2 years, we'd lost Dean Bailey and Phil Walsh. And again, we had to perform, get together as a group, as a team, staff members, players, and rally together and finish off the season in 2015. And we made the finals and won our first final. We lost to Hawthorn in our second week. But I'd say it's probably the most difficult time of my professional career, but learned so much about myself as a leader, as a manager in so many ways, and how to manage the people around you. Because we had to keep the program going, keep the group going with an interim senior coach coming in and working with our general manager of football, other stakeholders to make sure the club still functions, but respecting everyone's own processes in the grieving process around the club.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. That was just surreal when all that was going on. And we talk about performance under pressure. The game's going on. No one's stopping the season or pausing it while this goes on. So the fact you could all work through that was just incredible. And as you said, what you learned about yourself. Let's bring that into context now of, Nick, listen to this program right now is a brilliant salesperson who's lost their way. They were incredible once, and for some reason they're off track. And I love that saying. You and I were going for a walk today and you said, you can still pull this back. You can still pull this back. What advice or guidance or recommendations do you have for people that have lost their way? They've got the skills, that they know the process, but for whatever reason, they've chosen to go against that and now they're paying that price. How do you get back on track?
Good question again, Lee. I love these questions. First and foremost, making sure that they understand the processes and systems that have allowed them to get to the position they've been in before. And everyone has ups and downs and peaks and troughs in their career. And for a player, it might be on game day or having a lull in performance over a month, or they're in and out of the team. Myself, of having a bad run of it, or staff members are having a bad run of it. Use another example. We have one of our staff members is a physical performance coach who's solely in charge of rehab. And if our rehab processes haven't gone well, or there's recurrences, we call it recurrences when they come back from an injury and then they do it again, or they've had a supplementary injury, they can go into a deep, dark place. not trusting their systems, their processes. What have I done wrong? And all these things that come into their mind. But ultimately, they're in a role and they've done well and succeeded for a reason. So trying to reflect back to that and what got them there in the first place. I wouldn't say not getting ahead of yourself. I'd suggest you can get ahead of yourself. But it's more about, okay, well, if you take your eye off the ball for a minute or two or a week or two, or can bite in the backside. So there's that element. And then there's also the element of, well, you start doubting yourself. Why do you start doubting yourself? But things don't go to plan. Things don't go to plan within a game. Things don't go to plan within a program, because you get thrown curveballs. And if you don't reflect on what got you there in the first place, you can fall into this spiral. So I always say, look, get back to your fundamentals. What are your fundamentals? System, what's your role within the group, role within the team, role within a real estate agency? You're actually part of a team. So what does your role mean to the team? How important is your role within that team? And are you following your systems and structures within that environment? And I think if you fall back to that, that can get you out of the hole very, very quickly. If you keep reflecting on yourself and self-doubting yourself, that can affect you personally, professionally, at home. And I talk to myself about this. When I'm having a bad day or a bad week or a bad run of it, and you're under huge pressure, the coach is blasting you, and a match committee, or why have we got these injuries? We've got a spate of these injuries, and you start going, what have I missed? What have I done? Am I too old for this now, or am I taking my eye off the ball because I've just been in it too long? And you start doubting yourself, and you go back to it. You go back to it, and you start reviewing it. And you think, well, no, I know what I'm doing, and maybe I did miss the boat on this one. Maybe I took my eye off the ball because I got a little bit complacent because I've been in the trenches for such a long time. But it's also a quick reminder. So don't take your eye off the ball, because if you do, you'll get, as we spoke about just before, you can get found out. But again, I always say, well, go back to what got you there in the first place. Your systems, or the systems that you're working with in that team environment, the role you play, the importance of your role, and stick to those processes. And then, okay, well, I took my eye off the ball for this reason, but I know the system, I know what got me there. I know what I need to do. And it's just being respectful of that. I think the other one as well, Lee, is no one's going to be able to perform at their best every day. You know you're going to fall into a rut at some stage. But just expect it. But expect it's going to happen.
Yeah, don't be surprised.
Don't be surprised. It will happen to everyone. Everyone has a bad day. Everyone has a bad in your industry or the real estate industry. I'm sure you're going to have a period of time where I'm not making any sales, or we're having a downturn in profit, or whatever it might be. I'm sure you start doubting yourself, think, that's what's going on here. If I take my eye off the ball, and if you go back, what systems and processes and checks and balances have you got in place that have got you to succeed in the past? Maybe there's an answer in that, but expect it might happen. If you're not prepared for the expectation that you're going to have injuries in our industry, or losses in our industry, and how you handle that, then you're not prepared for it. So it's being prepared for the unexpected as much as anything. But again, fall back to your systems and process and your roles within those systems.
This is so powerful. A saying I don't like, but I understand people say it, is back to basics. And basics for some people is like, well, that's boring. I did that when I started. To me, it's back to foundations. And if you're a real estate sales professional, you know what the patterns of a week look like. You know how many phone calls you need to be doing, how many vendors you need to be communicating with, how many presentations you need to be going to. You know that. You've got to get back into that behavior. And unfortunately, a lot of people, well, actually real estate salespeople, and for our management team listen to this audio as well, they're not dissimilar to athletes. Athletes are single-focused and can be selfish at times. And I think this is something I know you're speaking at the Complete Leader Conference this year for us, and someone can be very goal-orientated and they're focused on their tasks, but developing that balance for them, that life study of sport, how do you manage that for people?
The life balance, it's a challenging one. I'll talk about myself first and I'll talk about other people, but a younger version of me was very poor at it. And those people who worked with me over many years will know that I was probably more of a manager in my early high-performance management world. Work ethic high. Even prior to that, as I was coming through the ranks as a strength and conditioning coach, I thought more is better. And you want to put yourself out there. I'll be the first to arrive, last to leave. I'll be there every day. I'll be in the office when the players have the day off. and you think you're doing yourself a service and staying ahead of the game. But very quickly, you do realise that you can get burnt out from it, and you're being as efficient as you need to be. And I honestly believe that you need to go through that process, because the easy thing for me to do now is say, to talk to a younger version of me and say, well, don't go in the office on your day off. You don't have to get there at 5 o'clock in the morning and finish at 7 o'clock at night. Because by doing that, you learn, one, how to be more efficient, two, how to develop your systems and processes and philosophies, and three, probably the most important thing is that you'll look back later on and go, well, did I burn myself out so much that I didn't get my processes and systems right when it mattered? And quite often, sort of similar in your industry, you lose touch with your family. You know, if you've got a young family and you're working 14-hour days, you know, every day, 6-7 days a week, you start losing relationship with your daughter, your son, your wife, walking at home, burnt out completely. And you look at it and go, well, I know I need to do this at the time because it's about my future, about my career. I'm setting up my future and career, but then you think, well, at what cost? So I think there's an element where you need to go through that process, but you have to be very, very careful at what cost. You know, some people are very career-minded and they just, you know, they haven't got partners or, in a relationship or kids at that stage. That's fine. But when you reflect back on it, go through that system and processes, but if you've got a family, it's completely different. So to handle that on a personal level, in this stage of my career, I have to get away to the gym. I have to spend some time walking in the mornings just to switch off, but also value the time I've got with my family and have that switch off time. When I get to work, when I get to the club, then it's game on. It's game on. So I've become a manager in that space now because of my own experiences, but I've got staff members. It only happened very, very, very recently. I've got a staff member who's about to have a baby and he's 40 years of age and he lives on the northern beaches, travels from Homebush to the northern beaches every day. And he's burning himself out to earn more money. And we found out that he was sleeping in his car on the way home from work. And I'm sitting there as a manager going, how have I allowed this? Have I taken my eye off the ball with this guy? But privately, he's going through his own difficulties and challenges. So since I learned that, I've tried to make sure I have his well-being at my front of mind and our peers, so our staff members within our high-performance team, to look out for each other. It was a quick reminder to me to say, well, I used to be like that.
Yeah.
But I can care about this person now within the safety of our team to look out for each other, to make sure it doesn't happen. Afford them the time to, it's okay, you don't have to do that today. It's not helping them filter through. That's the most important thing. You're not doing the club a disservice. You're not performing your role within our system. You're not doing the players a disservice. Go home or get out of the club now so you can go and spend some time with your partner, because you're going to be at your best the next day, you know, fresh, recovered, and hopefully knowing that there's people around you that care about you and your career.
Absolutely amazing. And systems and processes, people sometimes miss why they're important. Nick, you and I were laughing at my cake rack today. My cake rack is got my power supplies on it, my docks, everything. Wherever I go, it has to be there. And, you know, I work on some big stages around the world. When you turn up, which is my grand final, you know, you're speaking with some of the best speakers in the world, there's no second chance. You either know what you're doing, but I never worry about me speaking because all my systems and processes are there. My sequence is in line. I just get to enjoy it. Actually, you were speaking about the Fijian football team, how they approach rugby, and I'd like to finish on this because it's a really good example of life. What was your observation, Fiji, when they won the World Cup? How's their playing style so different?
Yeah, the Fijian Sevens, they just, well, first and foremost, when you watch them play, they look like they're having fun. they like playing touch footy in the backyard, and it comes across from their culture. They've played it from their kids. They playing bare feet in the fields in Fiji, and you know, muddy fields and horrible conditions. But they just do that. That's part of their life and culture. So we know when we played them on the World Series that when we got across the white line, they're very hard to beat. They're strong. They're big. They can be dirty at times, or they come across as dirty, but they have a lot of fun. They sing a lot. You watch them do a recovery session at a hotel. We're sitting in, we get to travel to some fortunate places on the World Series. We're sitting at 5-star hotel in Dubai, and they come down, they're in the swimming pool, doing a recovery session in the morning as a group, all doing the same exercises and singing. So you go down for breakfast in the morning, we'll go see the Fijians sing along and do their recovery session. Amazing to watch. It's superb, but they enjoy what they do. Doesn't mean they don't work hard, and you see how hard they train, and I'm very aware of some of their training methods when they're even back in Fiji, but they look like on their game day, in their game moment, they have fun, and that's where it all comes together. And I think you never lose sight of that, but it's you running your course, and your courses are all around the world, Lee. When you turn up on game day, you should have fun.
Yeah. Well, if the preparation's done, the sequences are there, and in my world, the manual's written well, everything's been methodically done. But without that, you're just hoping you pull it off and, I'll have a good month again. Do you deserve a good month? I think having the confidence in your own ability to achieve targets and meet the challenge of the competition is something you've spoken about to me off air. Explain that.
Essentially, having the confidence in your own ability, Lee, to achieve your targets and meet the challenges of the competition, that's paramount. And that's not being arrogant, but it's being just confident, especially if you've done the work. Being able to replicate and sometimes exceed what has been done in practice or a training scenario. So we'll practice and train at certain intensities and sometimes often harder, like especially in pre-season, some training sessions that we need to train at a higher intensity or do more work than we didn't necessarily do in a game. But that ultimately prepares you physically and mentally to know that, well, when you're faced with challenges on game day, or we've got a patch of play where the players are just exhausted, they know they've done the work. We've actually trained hard. We've been there and done that. That gives you confidence. It might not go your way on the day or in that moment, but at least you've done the work.
Absolutely amazing. And Nick, it's really exciting to see the next part of your career naturally evolving. Here you are on a podcast. You've travelled the world and done all these amazing things, but it is a passion of yours to help the younger you of the next performance coaches coming through to be that assistance and guidance that you've been to those grand finals. I've lost by 1 point. I was watching the game that night and my wife, Robin, was screaming and shouting, and it was just 1 point. But it's only now you can look down the line to the next one coming through and allow them to profit from that knowledge due to your own platform.
That's the key at the moment, I think I'm at that stage in my career in life that I look at some younger high-performance managers or even strength and conditioning coaches or staff within a high-performance team who are coming through. And for what it's worth, you want to help them. You want to help them along the journey, understand the trials and tribulations, the ups and downs, help guide them through their experiences, because they're going to have experiences that I may not have had, but from experience, be able to help them navigate there through the decision-making, how they cope with under pressure, how they perform themselves under pressure, helping them develop their own systems and processes and philosophies, which may not be mine. It's not me telling them what to do. It's to help them on their own journey. So when they're sitting in a chair like this doing a podcast and 20 years down the track, that they've got their own journey and experiences that they can pass on knowledge for. I think as well, the longer I've been doing this, that there is a human element to it, that we are human beings and everyone's got feelings and emotions and we're not robots. The easy thing to turn up to work and be a robot, but turn up to work every day. But ultimately, in 20 years' time, you're going to have family, you're going to have friends that you may have lost contact with because you've been buried in the noise of day-to-day work, whether it's in a sporting environment, real estate environment, finance environment. But to reflect on that and say, well, hang on a minute, life's pretty good. Life's good. You're going to be okay. In 20 years' time, you're going to look back and go, you'll be okay. You've done the work, you've done the hard yards, and you'll have a good future ahead of you. And giving that confidence to have that vision, because when you're in the moment, when you're in the day-to-day throes of 30-year-old or 40-year-old working 18-hour days or whatever it might be, waking up at night, there's always that fear factor of, am I going to make it? Am I good enough to make it? Whether it's your career, being a high-performance manager, being a successful strength and conditioning coach, running the best real estate agency in the country, but be able to mentor them to go, well, you're going to be okay. You'll be all right. You'll be able to sit here on the Gold Coast, like where we are at the moment, one day and just go, life's pretty good, and I've still got a lot to offer.
Nick, absolutely fantastic interview, and what timing with this one coming out. We're looking forward to having you at the Complete Leader for our leaders who are trying to keep their teams together, especially under the performance under pressure. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Lee.